It's a special RFD-TV Live, courtesy of the folks at SFP. Improving your forage from the ground up is our topic this evening, and we have a live audience joining us here. Cattlemen and women from around the United States here in Nashville, Tennessee. Yeah, the Cattlemen are taking Nashville, Tennessee by storm this week from all over North America. And it's a privilege to have these folks here with us, a live studio audience, as we talk about something very important to the folks in the beef cattle industry and dairy men and women as well, that crucial forage, and also how important it is to make sure that that forage has the best opportunity that it can to be productive for those folks in the livestock industry. Let me introduce to you my friend Mark Oppold out here in the audience. Mark is the news director for RFD-TV, and he's going to help us out. Mark, it's appreciated to have you standing by here with us to help handle some of the chores as we'll visit with the folks. Some folks will have questions that they'll want to direct toward our panelists.
Absolutely, Max. Great to work with you again, and welcome everybody here to RFD-TV Live. And we do, as you say, have some of the top beef producers in the country, right, folks, here tonight? Yeah, come on, let's hear it. Yeah, there you go. And Max, you got a great panel there, but a little bit later, these folks will have some questions for the panel, I am sure, as everybody wants to improve a little bit each year, and that's what this convention's all about, and that's what tonight is all about with SFP. So back to you, Max.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Let me introduce to you folks who watched these broadcasts on occasion. This will be a very familiar face for you. Dr. Larry Sanders, President and CEO of SFP. Good to have you back, young man. Always appreciate it. I learn from you every time.
Oh, great, Max.
As the scientist, the genuine bona fide scientist on the panel, and thank you for allowing us to be a part of the program and learn a lot from you once again.
Thanks, Max.
We appreciate it. And Dave Schwartz is here. He's the National Products Manager for SFP, and you've got a parking spot outside. You're here so often, I think, now, right?
Well, it is fun to be back and look at this crowd tonight. I'm excited about talking to the cattle producers tonight and maybe sharing some ideas on how we can both synergize together to make it better.
You and I talked a little bit earlier today about what AVAIL and NutriSphere-N from SFP can do for a variety of crops, but you said some of the most significant gains you see are in forage.
Yes, Max. In my travels across the country in the last 6 years working at SFP, cattlemen have probably produced some of the greatest yield responses that we've had with our products because you're getting advantage of every granule of fertilizer to that forage crop, and we're excited to share some of that information with you tonight and how it can better your operation. But it is a lot of fun when we work with forage people.
Yeah, I can tell you light up on this subject. You enjoy it. At the far end of the table, we welcome Will VanNostran from Clovis, New Mexico, President and CEO of Mountain States Consulting Incorporated. We've had you on the phone in the past. It's great to have you here in person. Will.
Thanks, Max. Thanks. It's good to be back.
Tell us about your consulting business.
My consulting business is in Clovis, New Mexico. I've been a private nutritionist consultant there, and I've been in the consulting field for over 20 years, and predominantly with dairy. Mostly with dairy
operations. What would be the geography you serve?
New Mexico, Texas, and a little bit of Oklahoma and Kansas.
Just for a little preview of what we'll talk about just a little bit later here, forages are crucial for milk production and maximizing production, aren't they?
Yes, Max. That's at Mountain States Consulting, we really concentrate on forages. We've teamed up with partner companies like SFP here to make sure that we grow high-quality forages in abundance so that we can really focus on the quality of the forage, because high-quality forage makes healthy cows and productive cows.
And with that investment, you can't afford anything but healthy and productive, can you?
That's right.
By all means, maximizing the opportunity. Let's talk about nutrient management. Larry and Dave, let's get this ball rolling here a little bit, starting with you, Larry. How crucial is it? What kind of a difference can it make?
Well, for forages, Max, you know, all that fertilizer goes right on the surface, and so it's so important to protect that fertility, because as you keep continuing to apply fertilizer on the surface, you acidify that top half-inch layer. It really fixes the phosphorus. It really kicks off the nitrogen. So protecting that nitrogen with NutriSphere, protecting that phosphorus with AVAIL can save you as much as 75 to 95% of that phosphorus being fixed, and as much as 30 to 50% of that nitrogen being kicked off.
For folks who haven't seen you talk about this before, you get quite animated and excited about it, understandably, but can you give us the Cliff's Notes version of how it works, how the products actually do perform to help your fertilizer work better?
Absolutely, and I don't know if this is Cliff Notes or not, but anyway, we'll go through it. You know, there's some enzyme systems that control the loss mechanisms of nitrogen. One of those enzymes is urease, and you can't see it, but it's in your stomachs, it's in plants, it's in animals, and controlling that urease with NutriSphere is so important to halt that volatilization where you lose that nitrogen up in the air when you apply it to a surface situation like you cattlemen do. With the phosphorus, what we do is we protect that phosphorus from positive ions. It's a negative ion, so it attracts positive ions, but we coat that phosphorus with the AVAIL. It has a big negative charge, so now it takes up those positive ions that normally fix your phosphorus. So it's really a neat chemistry. It really gives you the advantages of not getting as much as 95% of your phosphorus fixed and tied up in the soil, and you don't get to use it. It's a huge advantage economically, and as far as cattlemen go, your animals are benefiting from that because they get more phosphorus into them. You know, you can't hang beef on a poor carcass, and phosphorus is so important for building that carcass.
You know this industry, don't you?
I try.
It's near and dear to your heart. Let me come back to a statistic you used. Did you say 95% of the phosphorus can be tied up? As much as 95%?
As much as 95% of it can be tied up, especially on soils like cattlemen use, where you're continually reapplying surface fertilizers and you're acidifying that soil.
Dave Schwartz,
big deal.
Yeah, weigh in here a little bit and share with us some of your insight and what you have found with forages.
Well, one of the things that has really brought to light in my travels was ammonium nitrate is a big source of nitrogen that a lot of cattle producers have been using in the past because it's been a product that did not volatilize as much as urea. But as we have worked around, of course, ammonium nitrate has a lot of government regulations attached to it. By treating the urea with NutriSphere, we can make you a superior product to ammonium nitrate. And urea nitrogen is, 4600 is 100% ammonium nitrogen. That's exactly what NutriSphere-N protects. And so you can take urea, put that NutriSphere on there, and we've got some people in the audience tonight. One of our largest customers, Tennessee Farmers Cooperative, is in the audience tonight. A lot of their producers have experienced that. They were a very large ammonium nitrate customer. They're making that transition, and maybe we'll hear from them later on. But that's something that is a very big, it's big in the nitrogen world where you can convert that use of ammonium nitrate, get away from that, get away from all the red tape tied to it, and use urea, which is a very safe product treated with NutriSphere to give you that season-long nitrogen protection.
Dave, you reminded me we have a very diverse geography represented here this evening. Are you finding AVAIL and NutriSphere-N work equally well, whether you're talking about Bermuda grass in Texas or alfalfa in Wisconsin?
That's the beauty of our products because it doesn't matter what crop you're focusing on. It's all done in the soil. What Dr. Sanders has developed here are products that only perform in the soil. These are very large, very heavy molecules that do not get absorbed by the plants themselves. So everything that both these products do takes place right in the soil. So it doesn't matter whether you're growing a garden or you're growing a big alfalfa crop or Bermuda grass or fescue. The products do their job at that soil level.
Will VanNostran, let's come down to you and let's talk about quality forage and everything that comes into play and some of the mistakes that perhaps producers are making, those things that can cost them dearly.
Yeah, in my field, I've been, as I said, a consultant for 20 years. I've seen a lot of different things, and over the years, one of the most important is building and constructing a proper silage pile, whether it's for a 100-yard feed, 100-head feed yard, or whether it's for a 10,000 cow dairy. I've seen piles that the spoilage is, 2 or 3 feet deep. I've seen where it's only a couple inches. So it's really important to take care of that forage once you harvest it out of the field.
We have a view here on the screen we're sharing with folks. You might talk a little bit about this, Will, what we're seeing.
Yeah, sure. This is a pile, triticale. There is a pushing tractor. And a couple points on this picture here is that you want to push no more than 8 inches of material and get that packed properly, and then have the next load come in. Where I see a lot of faults happen is the cutters will bring in the material too fast and they can't pack it properly.
Packing makes a difference, as you'll talk here in a moment or two.
Yeah, packing is very important. And this here, once it's constructed properly here, you can see it was covered with the plastic and then the tires on top. So on a properly constructed silage pile, Max, you should be able to drive up all the way up around it. It should just look like a mushroom just sitting on the ground.
There's a proper way to do that.
Yep.
All right. What else? You have some statistics you wanted to share also, right?
Yeah, sure.
Some data?
On the next slide, there's on that pile, and this goes back to the packing again properly, the density, the cubic foot, the density of the dry matter there, dry matter density of cubic feet, is they have it on the chart there. So this from University of Wisconsin-Madison, and it shows that if it's not packed properly, what the loss would be. Okay, most of the piles I see out in the industry they end up being around 12 to 14, and where you want to really try to target is about 15, and if you can, get around 20. But you can see the shrink there at 15 alone is about 16%. And if you're putting up 30,000 tons of corn silage or triticale silage, and that stuff's like $100 a ton, I mean, you're talking like, $500,000 of loss right there. So it's important to make sure that you pack properly. And you can get on any university website, and there's packing equations that you can pull off the website, or any extension agent can help you calculate what that out. How many tractors you got to have on that pile versus how many, how fast the fill rate is of the material coming in.
So it does little good to produce a quality crop in the field if you don't preserve what you brought in.
It's very critical to preserve it properly, because then you don't have any quality forage to feed.
Right. Let's take a look at some other data that you have to share here.
The next one shows, basically discusses on the bottom line there, you got your acid detergent fiber, and that's the portion of the plant that's not digestible. And on the y-axis, you got your digestible dry matter, which is the portion of the plant that is digestible, and that's where it comes in to make sure the nutrients are available in the soil, so they get proper development in the plant, proper growth. The better growth you have and the proper development, the more digestible dry matter you have. So you want to make sure that you cut that plant at the right stage of maturity. If you let that plant go too long, you get more and more undigestible fiber, which is, you go to the right of the chart there, and you see where the lines go down. So you lose digestible dry matter and you lose energy as the plant matures.
There are a variety of reasons it could come into play there to delay, but as every good producer knows, timing is crucial, by all means. You have another chart here for us?
Sure, and the follow-up to that, not only as a plant matures, if you don't cut it at the right maturity and the right moisture, not only will you lose the digestibility and the energy of the plant, the animal won't be able to consume enough because there's more fiber in it. And because of that fiber, you can see on this graph here shows that dry matter intake, which is on the y-axis, decreases as the plant matures.
There's plenty of bulk coming in there, but it's,
oh, yes.
it's not the nutrition that animal needs, you're saying.
That's correct.
Kind of like eating a salad, filling up on a salad.
Yes, yeah, a lot of salad.
Takes up too much space for the good stuff. All right, what else do you have there?
And here, to make my point, this here on alfalfa, just for example, on alfalfa, if you let it go to maturity, the digestible dry matter circle there is 57. And then if you harvest it at pre-bud, which is what's always recommended, the digestibility is at 67. That 10 units, if you're feeding 20 pounds of that material, that can really add up as far as digestibility intake for that animal, whether it's for beef or for dairy.
Very good. Another graph there, Will, or you have another one, or are you all done there?
There's one more graph. It kind of hits the home run here. On the digestibility of that fiber, the more it's digestible, the more milk and beef that can be produced. But this one here talks about milk. And as the digestibility of the forage goes up, you see that on the right there it has 70% NDF digestibility. That's a young, good growth plant. That equates to about 95 pounds of milk, whereas conversely on the other side you got 30% NDF digestibility, and that's about 75 pounds. So you got a 20-pound differential there just because you got a more digestible plant. And that 20 pounds of milk could be, 40 cents a cow a day, and you're milking 10,000 cows. That can really add up to about $750,000 to be exact, Max.
To be exact, yeah. Who's counting, huh?
Yeah.
I'm sure in the time that you've been in business, over the 20 years or so, your consultancy has been in business there in New Mexico. Haven't you seen giant strides in the understanding and the recognition of the importance of forage? And how far do we have to go yet to really get there?
Well, there's been a lot of strides made in the market that I cover, and the last 5 years, significantly, there's been some changes on the silage construction, the silage piles, really taking care of business as far as details. Because what's happening is that as the industry consolidates, inputs are skyrocketing. I have clients that use the SFP products. It brings in the whole thing is that it cut costs on one side and make sure you utilize the nitrogen and the phosphorus that you're spending money on, make sure it's available for the plant, and then also you get proper growth on the plant, and then you got to make sure you store it right. So you're trying to make sure you're going all the way through the cycle so that you're ended up with a good material so you have a product to sell.
Are you finding, Will, that more producers are trying to take control of that themselves? I mean, rather than perhaps farming it out to someone else or relying upon a custom cutter, they're getting at least more actively involved in the process.
Yes, they are, Max. And what I've seen, I've been in New Mexico, West Texas for 11 years. And when I first moved down there, there was, maybe a handful of guys that had their own acres. They were actually cutting their own acres and harvesting their own crops. Now almost all of them are.
Really?
Yeah. And what's happening, they're trying to control the input costs because input costs are going up, but they also want to maximize the quality of that forage. And that's where folks like SFP come in, where they can really hone in on the quality and how to grow it right.
They've come to realize the importance of the right nutrient management program and then enhancing those nutrients or maximizing what you use there, right?
Exactly.
We'll hear a lot more about NutriSphere-N and AVAIL, and we'll also talk with some other folks here in the audience. This is one of those rare occasions when you don't have the opportunity to call in because we're going to rely upon the producers who are here in Nashville, who have come in from all over the United States because they know this business so well, and they'll have some very keen questions for our guest. Will VanNostran from New Mexico, Dave Schwartz from Iowa with SFP, and Dr. Larry Sanders, President and CEO of SFP. We'll be back on this special edition of RFD-TV Live during the week of the Cattleman's Convention. Stay with us. We're back on RFD-TV Live, improving your forage from the ground up with cattlemen and women from around North America here in Nashville, Tennessee for the Cattleman's Convention. A whole week of great activities, a lot of educational activities they are participating in, and this is one of them. With Dr. Larry Sanders and Dave Schwartz from SFP and Will VanNostran from New Mexico, who consults with folks in the dairy industry there. I asked you for the Cliff Notes version a while ago, and I realized that, Max, we need to talk a little more about this, truly, because folks are keenly interested in the science. They want to know how it works. They want to know that there is a sound scientific foundation under that. So would you please go into a little more detail for us, Larry?
Okay, we'll still do the Cliff Notes version, but to tell you exactly how this works, there are enzymes in the soil that cause losses of nitrogen. One of those enzymes is urease. Urease splits urea in half, and ammonia is kicked up into the air. So you lose that nitrogen. And you can lose 30% of your nitrogen in just an ordinary year. A couple of years ago, we had all this rain, all this moisture. You maybe lost 50% of it. Because the other enzyme is nitrous ammonium. It has an enzyme that works with it. And that particular enzyme converts the ammonium nitrogen into nitrates. And so you lose those nitrates leaching through the soil. And then denitrification, if you got puddling water, then again, those nitrates can be converted to nitrogen, pure nitrogen, N2, and be kicked off into the air. So those are the loss mechanisms that you're going to face out there every year. Now, to get around that, we've invented NutriSphere-N. NutriSphere-N is a chemistry that controls these enzymes. And what it does is it controls the metals in this, around the nitrogen fertilizer that activates these enzymes. So if these enzymes don't get activated, then you don't get the loss of nitrogen through volatilization. You don't get the changeover from ammonium nitrogen into nitrates as much. And so you've got more ammonium nitrogen through the growing season, and you got less volatilization. More ammonium nitrogen through the growing season is good because if it's all converted to nitrates, then the plant has to convert every bit of that nitrogen back into ammonium nitrogen. Ammonium, and that's the most expensive energy-consuming process the plant does all year long. So if it's doing all that conversion, taking nitrates and putting them back into ammonium to go into proteins and amino acids, then guess what? you're losing energy, you're losing yields, you're losing plant health. You're going to get more diseases because nitrates are not good if it's all nitrates. So use NutriSphere, stop the volatilization, keep a lot of your nitrogen in the ammonium form, so you'll have some nitrates, but not all nitrates, so we don't want all nitrates. So that's how NutriSphere-N works. It saves you a bunch of money because you don't have to put out as much nitrogen. You can use less nitrogen and still get the same effects. You can go to our website, Max, at www.sfp.com, and you can look at a lot of grower testimonials where they've cut back on their nitrogen, they're using less nitrogen, getting better yields in some cases. There's a lot of data from research trials on there. You can look at every bit of this. But for you ranchers and growers out there, it's so important that you get every bit of money's worth out of your fertilizer that you paid out of your back pocket. And that's what NutriSphere-N does for you on nitrogen. Now, let's take phosphorus. And we use this long polymer, and this polymer has negative charges on it. So it loves positive charges. So when we put this on the phosphorus, phosphorus is a negative charge. This polymer is a negative charge, but it's a big negative charge. So when you put it in the soil, normally iron and aluminum at low pHs, calcium, magnesium, and high pHs, which are plus charges, are attracted to phosphorus. They precipitate out the phosphorus. A very violent reaction forms a very insoluble precipitate. And you can lose 95% of your phosphorus. That's a shame is what it is. And ever since we've discovered phosphorus as a fertilizer, this is what's been happening. But now SFP has created a molecule, and it's called AVAIL, that you can apply to your phosphorus as a coating, and the dealer can do it for you, or you can inject it into your liquid systems, or you can put it in your irrigation system if you want to, and put it out that way. But that polymer now takes that iron, aluminum, calcium, magnesium out of solution around your fertilizer, and so the phosphorus remains as phosphorus, not precipitated out. And so now you're getting that phosphorus available, and when that plant root grows down through the soil, it sees something it's never seen before, and that's huge amounts of available phosphorus. And as farmers, you think about, you spend maybe $40, $60 an acre on phosphates, and think about losing 95% of that. That's a bad thing, but think about the productivity you lose, the animal health that you lose from not getting phosphorus in there. Because like I said, you can't hang beef on a poor carcass. Phosphorus is instrumental in building that carcass, and you all know that. I'm not telling you anything. But phosphorus, the dollars you're spending for phosphorus, you can lose 95% of that. So that's what AVAIL does for you.
Professor, that's a superb explanation. Hey, you can keep me awake in your class anytime. You know, you talked about the rains and heavy rains that we've had in some areas, and you can see in some of the crops the nitrogen loss, can you not? I mean, is it always as obvious, though, Larry, when you're losing the nitrogen?
Well, you know, it depends how much nitrogen you're putting on, and if you want to lose half of it and say you still got enough, well, then that's what a lot of people do, because they lose a lot of their nitrogen, and they over-apply their nitrogen so they'll have enough, whether it rains or no matter what the conditions are. When we used to could do that when nitrogen was cheap. But guess what? The price of nitrogen's gone up, and it'll continue to go up for the next however many years because the producers know that that's a valuable commodity. It's an essential nutrient, and you folks have to have that. So the prices are going to continue to grow, and you'll be faced with this problem more and more every year. But again, you have a solution, and you can control your fate as far as nitrogen fertilizers go. You can stop the volatilization. You can stop the leaching with NutriSphere-N.
Dave Schwartz, it occurs to me, too, that more and more of our producers are operating in environmentally sensitive areas where the nutrient management is being watched very closely, and you're somewhat under the microscope in some of these regions, and obviously what you put on needs to stay where you put it.
It's becoming more and more of an issue all the time as I travel. I'm sure a lot of you live in watershed districts. We pay close attention to those. In fact, we've had several that have went out and done their own independent studies, and that's great for us because what they're proving is both of these products are doing exactly what Dr. Sanders says they're doing. One in Ohio that the NRCS did their own study, and we're raising the levels of phosphorus into the crops by 25 to 40%, increasing the productivity of that crop for that grower 29 to 30%. We see the same thing in nitrogen. Of course, I come from the state of Iowa. We have a lot of our lands tiled, and they're measuring the amount of water that is contaminated with nitrates coming out of our tile lines. And of course, that happens to run pretty much 12 months out of the year. So we're under the microscope a lot, and one of the best ways to prevent that is to keep your nitrogen from converting to nitrate. That's exactly what NutriSphere-N does. It is a very big help in stretching your ammonium nitrogen. When that nitrogen is in the ammonium form, you're going to get it in the crop. You're not going to have it go on down through the soil profile and out the tile line, or in a lot of your cases, through erosion and heavy rainfall, taking it into a water source. And that is going to be the further, as we go, regulations are already being proposed, lots of dollars are being spent on the research, and it's just a matter of a couple years before we're all mandated on exactly how much and when we can apply nitrogen. So, and on the phosphorus side, it's no different.
For you folks who've just tuned in, you're watching a special edition of RFD-TV Live during the week of the Cattleman's Convention here in Nashville, Tennessee. So we've been joined in the studio by men and women of the cattle industry from all over North America as they're getting the story about quality forage production and how producers can enhance that production. Improving your forage from the ground up is our title on this broadcast, with Dr. Larry Sanders and Dave Schwartz from SFP and Will VanNostran from New Mexico, who consults with producers. Do some of those folks, Will, do some of their own research? I mean, they're serious about it, or do they rely upon you as the consultant to come in and say, this is exactly what I need, and they rely on you to do some of that plot work?
Well, Max, it's a little bit of both. We've got some high pH soil down there, and we've seen tremendous responses with the available phosphorus by using the AVAIL. And I have some clients that do a lot of green chop forage, straight cut to the cows, and that regrowth is very important, and we feel that the phosphorus is very critical on that regrowth and getting that plant going. And on the protein side, we've seen a lot of high protein forages come in from using these products on these dairy herds. And protein, to follow up with Dr. Sanders' comment, not only phosphorus is important for that carcass when it's developing, but protein is very important for the bone growth and development of that animal. So if you got high quality forages coming from, you got all the nutrients available, you can really develop and see that when you harvest that crop. And if you do tests on it or send it to a lab, you can see what the digestibility and the proteins are.
Dave, I know you're one who likes to collect data from growers and from third-party researchers out there, and you like to put it all together and share it. You have some to pass along this evening?
Well, we do have a couple trials, Max. You know, it wouldn't be an SFP show if we didn't have a couple of those.
That's right.
We're going to talk about NutriSphere-N corn trials here first. And this is all the database that we've done, universities. We do research, 29 universities, lots of independent researchers like a Will VanNostran. We're finding that more people like Will have a better handle on this on a local level, and his data, like what you guys produce, is very valuable to us to share with other growers. So this is a NutriSphere-N trial that we're going to show you right now, and this is 184 different trials that have been conducted and data gotten back to us. And if you look at the average yield increase on corn is 13.2 bushel per acre. The product costs about 8.2 cents per unit of NDUs. Now, as Dr. Sanders said, a lot of you can look at the amount you've been applying, probably back that off more than enough to cover the cost of the product and be way more efficient and be really good stewards to your environment. That's what we're all about at SFP, getting more out of what you put on and being a good steward, which you all want to be. I know that. I farm myself, and that's the last thing you want to be, is doing something that's harmful to your environment. So this is our database on corn. It's phenomenal what we're seeing. It doesn't matter whether it's any type of a hay crop or forage crop, or corn, and sorghum, which is obviously two of the bigger markets out there. We see that kind of a yield response, and it's usually somewhere in that neighborhood of 5 to 15%. And just based on the year you have and the type of nitrogen loss you have. Nitrogen loss is very subject to the weather, as you all know. If you have that perfect year, which I don't know if we ever know what that is anymore, but where I come from, it comes in 5-inch amounts. But it seems that, if you had an inch of rain every 10 days, you probably wouldn't see a lot of nitrogen loss. But it doesn't seem like that's the world we live in anymore. So when we get these huge rain events, or we go extreme amount of days like you folks in Texas and Oklahoma did this year without rain, having nitrogen that is not going up in the air on you or having it available to that crop really makes a difference.
I bet you have more data to share.
You know me
taking
too
a
well.
stab in the dark here.
You know, Larry talked about AVAIL and NutriSphere. What we have, when we put the two products together in a system, in a cropping system, we call that stacking. And that just merely means that we're using both technologies to improve the overall performance of that crop we're growing. And in essence, basically by having the AVAIL in that phosphorus portion of your program, giving your plant a better root system, and that's what phosphorus will do for your crop, whether it's forage or corn or sorghum. It is going to help the structure of that plant, give it a bigger structure, a bigger base, bigger root system. And of course, I like to use the example, more straws in the ground to draw more moisture and more nutrients for that plant. On a lot of times on corn, we'll see a much larger diameter stalk. That's what the AVAIL and the phosphorus is providing. We can prove this in tissue samples, and it's very obvious. Most every time we see AVAIL in a field, we'll see an increase in tissue phosphorus in that neighborhood of 15 to 25%, which is huge. So when we look at adding the NutriSphere then to your nitrogen program on top of that AVAIL, so you've already got a bigger plant and a bigger stalk, we manage the nitrogen over the top, no matter which way you apply it, be it liquid or dry, through a pivot, whatever manner that you put it on, and we protect that nitrogen and don't allow it to volatilize or don't allow it to turn to nitrate and leach. When you've got the bigger root mass already there to take up more of it, you just pick up a double bonus. And what we call there is a stacking. It's 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. We see a bigger yield enhancement than we see with either product by themselves. So that's what our phrase stacking means, and it's something that you really want to look at in any cropping system you're managing if you have both inputs that you need for that crop. So the results, it doesn't matter what crop. If you need phosphorus and nitrogen, you'll see a much bigger result when you put the two together.
I heard you talk about it in the past in corn, for example, but it works just as well in alfalfa.
Well, it works phenomenal in your grass crops. We did studies at Kansas State for several years down there on brome grass, and what we saw there was many growers, typically go out and put a full nitrogen program on their brome grass. But what we saw in the research that was done there by Dr. Barney Gordon was that if you'd put 30 pounds of phosphorus, treat it with AVAIL, instead of running 120 units of N, run 60 and treat that with NutriSphere and have the AVAIL on the 30 of phosphate, we were growing just as much brome with that much less fertilizer by doing it, enhancing those two elements. And that basically shows you that there's 60 pounds of that probably has been wasted in the past. So that's really some work that's been done. And I even tried it on my own farm, Max, and it does work that way.
You found it to be true in your own instance. We advanced briefly there to another slide ahead of you. You want to move ahead and talk about that
The
next
forage.
graph?
The forage.
There we go.
And of course, this is what's near and dear to all your hearts out there. We look at a lot of different forage crops as we travel and work with cattle producers across the country. And alfalfa, I can tell you just personally, and many alfalfa trials that I've been involved in, a lot of you guys, and Will's been great at talking about this tonight, the earlier you can cut it, get it in that early bud stage, that's the best alfalfa. Well, I've got producers that have been on the AVAIL program on their alfalfa now for several years that are cutting. They took their cutting dates down from like 32 days down to 18. That's the regrowth that AVAIL is providing on that phosphorus. Now that's huge. Guys are taking their total tonnage of alfalfa. They might have been growing 6, 7 tons. I've got producers now that are growing 8, 10, and one in real particular that hit 12 this year in the Midwest. So I mean, phosphorus is very critical to alfalfa. Whereas now you go to the other crops, then you have the nitrogen becomes very important. And whether it's Bermuda, brome, fescue, a lot of people, we need to be looking at put a little shot of phosphorus in that mix. I know a lot of you probably just go straight in on it, but there's a big need to have a little bit of phosphorus in it, really stimulate that root growth underneath so you can maximize the nitrogen in the water that you get over the top. And when we look at the overall average of all these forage crops, when you use our products on them stacked, AVAIL and NutriSphere, we're looking at an average of 1,214 pounds per acre increase in production. Now, you put dollar figures to that like Will was talking about, that's a lot of dollars. And we're only talking a few dollars to use these products, so the return on investment a lot of times is anywhere from 5 to 10 to 1.
Great story, Dave. Thanks for sharing it with us here on this edition of SFP Live on RFD-TV Live. Mark Oppold, news director for RFD-TV, is here in the audience, out here with our producers, and you have a gentleman standing there with you. Maybe a question?
I certainly do, Max. Again, those people just joining us tonight, it is RFD-TV Live with SFP, and we are live here with some of the folks that are coming in town to Nashville for the National Beef Cattlemen's Association, and we have Alan with us from Illinois, next to you, Dave. In fact, he has a couple of questions. Your first one, Alan.
Well, I wondered how long AVAIL would protect phosphorus if you fertilized your pastures in the late fall.
That's a great question. And Dr. Sanders, that's why you invented it.
Yeah, and you know, we've done work on this, and we started off going to Brazil where there's a lot of microbial activity and can really decompose molecules really fast. And we came up with a molecule that would survive those conditions down there. In North America, the polymer lasts and protects phosphorus for about 10 to 12 months. You can put it out in the fall. It's still active, protecting your phosphorus through the next summer.
Yep. You have a second question, Alan.
Yeah, the second one was we had a real wet spring in northern Illinois in 2011. I wondered how long NutriSphere would protect the N in a really wet spring.
Well, there again, NutriSphere is designed similar in its backbone, the chemistry backbone, so it's not going to decompose. It lasts for about 10 to 12 months. So it's a very sturdy molecule. What is described as slowly biodegradable. So it gives you long activity, long life.
All right, another question here for the panel, Max. This says from Roy from Texas. He just wanted to ask the question, and it is, what do I look for in a corn hybrid for silage?
That's a Will question.
Well,
We'll go down to Will at the end of the table here.
well, the first thing I would suggest is get with your soil guy and make sure you pick a variety that's compatible with low pH, high pH, or neutral. I mean, check your soil first and see which varieties grow well. If you got high pH soil, you definitely want to pick a variety that's tolerant to high pH. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing is you want to pick a variety that has, you know, digestibility as far as starch content and leafability. So most of the hybrids out there today, that leafy hybrids you can't really go wrong. I would say you got to start with the soil first, pick it for the soil first, and then generally the genetics today are there. You just got to go with what you have on the soil.
All right, we're going to go from Illinois to Colorado, give you an idea of the folks that are here from literally around the country. Here's Tom from Colorado. Tom, your question.
I was just wondering what type of moisture. I'm from the western Colorado where we only get 10, maybe 12 inches of moisture a year. What type of moisture range are we talking about with this stuff? You know, where will it work? Is it where I'm so dry? Is it useful for me, or is it not?
Well, let me say this. It activates with very little moisture. So if you can get your fertilizer into solution, the AVAIL will be in solution, or the NutriSphere for the nitrogen will be in solution. So it's going to be active in protecting your nitrogen with very little moisture in the soil. So when it does rain, if you get the moisture that you're looking for, you're going to get good growth, because that fertilizer is not only going to be there, but it's going to be protected from volatilization, from fixation with phosphorus. It's the way to treat your fertilizer.
I have a feeling more and more of our producers are falling into the category with Tom, shorter moisture, as we're finding this expansive drought continuing to expand. There's much more coming here on this edition of RFD-TV Live. We'll be back at the RFD-TV studios in Nashville with our audience of men and women from the cattle industry. Stay with us.
Indeed. Welcome back to RFD-TV Live with our friends from SFP, Improving Your Forage from the Ground Up. Max, a great program. We've got some great producers here from around the country. We've heard from Illinois, from Colorado. We have a gentleman here from Washington State. Your name and your question.
I'm Craig Veraska from North Central Washington. My question is, a lot of us have fertilizer in the form of manure that we apply, particularly we do out of our feedlot, onto our ground. How will AVAIL or NutriSystem or NutriSphere benefit me in the using it that way?
Boy, am I glad you asked that question.
Teed that up for you, I did.
You know, we're just on the verge of introducing a totally new product called More Than Manure. And sounds like we need to get with you and talk to you about this, but just to give you a snapshot of what we have, this is a product that has the combination of both of these great technologies in one container, and you'll be able to go ahead and spread your dry lot beef manure and follow that with an application of More Than Manure right behind that manure application of 18 ounces per acre, and you'll be able to enjoy the benefits of both AVAIL and NutriSphere in one application for livestock manures. And boy, do we have a database of that product built. We spent 2 years in researching and demoing out in the country. We've got thousands of acres that have already been applied, and the results are no less than phenomenal. And on February 13th, right here on RFD-TV Live, we are going to have our More Than Manure launch show, and I hope you can tune in that night. If you can't be back here, tune in, because we have a whole bunch of information. We are excited to show you about this exciting product and what it can do for the livestock producers that make manure their fertilizer base.
Yeah, you know, Max mentioned, Dave, you get excited talking about any product from SFP, but Max and I were with you in St. Louis at the No-Till conference here a couple of weeks ago, and it was one of the first times that those people there got to hear about this new product, and we interviewed one of the gentlemen that had been doing the 2 and 3 years of research. I know, very excited here, February 13th, to share with our RFD-TV audience about that new product. Craig has one more follow-up question, I believe.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the nutritionist there, when you're putting up silage, corn silage in particular, have you seen any difference in ag bagging in the big long sausage tube versus the round pile that you had a demonstration of? Have you seen any difference in the quality?
Okay, the question is difference of storage structure. As far as quality, no. No, if each procedure is done properly, there's no difference. There's just different guidelines. There's different guidelines for the theoretical length of cut and moisture. Generally on a pile, you want a little bit more moisture than you put in an ag bag. So it all goes back to packing again. But if they're both done properly, no, there's no difference.
All right, Craig, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Craig is from Washington State. Another one here, Max. This is from Larry from Alberta, Canada. Again, just had a question. Didn't want to be on camera here tonight, but had a great question, we think. Is it tank mixable with a herbicide?
Well, yes, you can use it with your herbicides. Like if you've got a 1034-0 solution and you're broadcasting that with weed control, you can put the AVAIL in with the 1034-0, so yes.
As the NutriSphere with a lot of your common pasture herbicides.
Yeah.
And
28%.
Yep.
You might have answered this before, but Larry asked also, can you mix it with liquid fertilizer?
Yes, absolutely. You can mix it with the nitrogen solutions or with the phosphate solutions, and it'll perform very well for you.
And we have specific products that are formulated just for the liquid phosphates and the liquid nitrogens. They're different than the dry ones.
All right, this is Larry, you had mentioned something. This comes from Mike, producer from Kansas, who is with us tonight. He wants to know, Larry, talk more about the applying SFP products through irrigation. He was interested in what you had to say there.
Well, we've had a lot of reports of people using this product through irrigation systems, not only pivot, but also, help me, Dave, drip irrigation. And no matter how you do it, it works really well. It protects the phosphorus, protects the nitrogen if you're looking at putting nitrogen through the pivot or phosphate through the pivot. And in a drip system, the only thing that I would advise against is using the AVAIL chemistry with phosphate every time you run phosphate through the drip. If you're going to use drip, I would use the AVAIL every other time, because you can put too much AVAIL in an area. So we don't want to do that, so we just advise maybe first time you put phosphate out, run AVAIL with the phosphate, and then if you go a second time, skip that one, and then a third time, use the AVAIL with the phosphate again. But not too much. Don't over-apply.
All right. Again, we are here live, SFP on RFD-TV Live. This more a question for the, not a question for the panel, but more of a testimonial. I have Andy here from the Tennessee Farmers Co-op, and what do you want to share with all of the viewers, the people here, and the panel?
I would just like to share with everyone that we've been using these products in the co-op system for the past 4 years. We've seen great results, you know, not only from row crop system, but also our pasture system. And Max and I have talked before, you know, that's 2 million acres in the state of Tennessee that this really applies to. So we're really excited. Got a lot of grower testimonials. So if anybody needs to know anything about these products, they can come and ask us. Be glad to share.
What are some of the things you're hearing from those people?
Well, not only have we seen results, you know, we worry about volatilization, but we've also seen results when it comes to leaching, because we've had some heavy floods, you know, in April, May before. And so we've seen great results with NutriSphere. But also people begin to learn about phosphate and its activity and how important it is in pasture also. So.
Yeah. And maybe one last question here for you, Andy, as they come into the co-op there, and maybe they haven't tested the product, haven't used it before, what's a good way to get these producers started? Maybe they're hearing about it tonight, they've heard about it, they haven't taken that step. What do you tell those people?
Well, I would encourage anybody, because anything we look at is going to act different on everyone's farm. So I'd encourage anybody to take the time and do a side-by-side or a test strip or something on your farm and see how it works for your operation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Andy. And one more question, and I'm going to throw it back to you, Max, for a little bit more conversation. This comes from Bill from Washington State. He says, does Will consult for beef herds, feedlots, or does he recommend someone?
Well, I can, I predominantly do dairy consulting, but I can refer you. So just feel free to give me a call.
Well, while we have you on the spot here for just a moment, testing for digestibility, do you have any guidance for producers as they go about that? How critical is it?
Okay, testing forages and/or grains. I would, most labs do a very good job. If you're testing for specific nutrients, you probably want to use a wet chemistry lab versus an NIR. A little more accurate when it comes to calcium, phosphorus, and those types of things. But I would, most labs do an excellent job. So I would pick one lab and stick with that lab so that you can have a whole tracking system so you can keep track of each number as you collect data. Because if you keep jumping around from lab to lab, each lab does each assay a little different. Sometimes there's a different person doing calcium one day, then there's another person doing calcium the next day. So I would just pick one lab and kind of stick with that lab.
You talked a little bit earlier about the importance of harvesting in a timely manner, and you underscored that and what a difference it makes. What if you can't? I mean, obviously there are many things that can come into play there, usually the weather, but is there anything you can then do to try to preserve as much as you possibly can of what you've got?
Yeah, usually, you know, sometimes Mother Nature, we don't have a control over that, and we end up harvesting a crop that's mature or late. And a lot of times that crop ends up being too dry. So what I would really concentrate on is if it's too dry, put an inoculant on it. You want to make sure that you really concentrate on the packing part of it. And I would probably, if you use that packing equation from any university, I would probably go another quarter more than what they're saying on that packing, because that material is going to act like a sponge because it's drier, so you want to make sure you pack it. And that's where actually an ag bag might be a little better than a pile. Back to your question earlier.
Mark, I think you have one more question there from our audience, folks.
I sure do, Max, and this is from Jay in Oklahoma. Wants to know, if a panel, will I see benefits of NutriSphere and AVAIL on my stocker wheat pasture?
That's been an area that we've been really seeing some very interesting results on. You know, that stocker wheat is really good feed, and it's really, if you can grow a little bit more of it, it's going to be some cheap weight gain for your cattle. And what the AVAIL portion will do with that, getting that AVAIL out there with that wheat in the fall, is going to build you tillers. It's going to build you a greener, healthier plant with more tillers. And of course, as a stocker, that's just what you're looking for. And we would suggest you put a little bit of nitrogen out at that same time if you're going to be looking at stocking that wheat. Have a little stack product there, a little NutriSphere on some urea or UAN and AVAIL on some phosphorus. And that's going to give you a very healthy plant with a high nutrition level in it for that stocker field.
Well, gentlemen, as we wrap up here, I'm going to ask each of you, starting with you, Will, down at the far end of the table, to just give us a little bit of a summary of what you would like to leave with the folks as we've talked about this topic this evening.
Well, I don't know if they could throw up the last slide I have or not.
I think
take-home message.
Difficulty getting back to
That's
it.
no big
Can you
deal.
just describe
Well,
it
the take-home message, I guess, I would concentrate on making sure that you cut your forage at the right maturity, and the right moisture, right maturity. Make sure you pack it and cover it well.
There's that slide.
That's the take-home package. Yeah, there you go. Cut right, pack right, and store right. The three R's.
Cut right, pack right, store right.
Yep, there
we'll
you go.
remember that.
Thank you, Max.
That boils it down. Thank you, sir. Dave?
Yep.
Well, you are faced with many decisions when it comes to raising your crops and raising your livestock, and it's all about minimizing risk. NutriSphere-N is an insurance policy that your nitrogen that you apply is not going to go up in the air on you or leach away and get off your land. It's proven technology. We've had it out there enough years now that it's proved itself for many a producer, and it's time, if you haven't had your dealer introduce you to it, go introduce him to it and let us come in and help get him set up to apply it for you. And on the AVAIL, it works every time. AVAIL will increase the level of phosphorus into your crop, any soil type, any climate. So these products are proven. We're now marketing them all over the world, and it's just a matter of getting your dealer to work with you. And again, if he's not up on it, let us know. We've got two of our representatives in the audience tonight. Reggie Underwood, who's got Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico. We have Eddie Wally, who does the Delta, Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana. Both of them are very knowledgeable, along with the rest of our sales staff, on helping you educate your dealer or get these products on. And I want to thank Tennessee Farmers Co-op, who have taken these products into their producers and shown them how they work.
And for folks at home, they can go to the website, sfp.com. There are some great testimonials posted there. You can hear directly from the producers, as we have. We've been going field to field across America and enjoying hearing the results that producers have gotten. Dr. Sanders?
I think one thing we forgot to mention tonight, Max, is grass tetany. And a lot of you think that grass tetany is tied to magnesium, and it is. You're right. But the problem is, as Dr. Dale Blevins, University of Missouri, discovered back in the 90s, is you can have magnesium in your soil, and you can't get it up in the leafy or shoot portion of the plant because you don't have enough phosphorus in the plant. Phosphorus is the energy compound. To move that magnesium from the roots up into the shoot where the cow can get it, you got to have a good phosphorus relationship. AVAIL is going to help you get that phosphorus into the plant, help you take up that magnesium, and you can overcome that grass tetany problem.
Mark, let's go back to you one more time.
Well, we want to remind the folks, Max, February 13th, we're right back here at RFD-TV Live with our friends from SFP. Dave kind of let us know what's coming out here, new products here for manure that's been in the research for 3 years. And again, they'll be telling you all about that 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central Time on February 13th. What a great way, Max, to start out this NCBA convention here in Nashville with our live people tonight. And great audience, don't you think, Max? Did a great job here tonight. Huh?
Absolutely. Well, the folks in Nashville will be blessed to have the cattlemen and women in town over the next few days, and what a magnificent era this is. It strikes me, Dr. Sanders, here in the closing seconds, with the opportunity that folks in the beef cattle industry have now provided in the marketplace. That risk management that Dave was talking about is crucial. Managing the risk to make sure you maximize the opportunity, right?
And there's so much risk associated with your fertilizers. Losing those fertilizers from volatilization, fixation, moving through the soil into the groundwater that you have to drink, your families have to drink. You can put a stop to that. Use the AVAIL for your phosphate. Make sure it doesn't get fixed and tied up in the soil, and you lose 95% of the dollars that you applied. Your wife could use that for a new kitchen.
That's right.
Is what I'm talking about. Right, ladies? And
wait a minute, let's put the hook on this man. It's time to wrap it up right now. Thanks, Dr. Sanders, Dave Schwartz. Well, we appreciate it. Thank you all over the country for joining us on this edition of RFD-TV Live from Nashville.